morning, Ralph.
Good morning. Okay, we're ready to begin Parshas Ekev. First Posuk. Boy, Ekev Tishmun. The word Ekev, the Torah could have written the word Im. Boy, Im Tishmun, if. But yet the Torah uses the word Ekev, which is the equivalent of that. However, the word Ekev alludes to other things, as we'll discuss in a moment. And if you will heed my mishpatim, or Eileh, these laws, ushmartim v'asisim osam, you retain them and you will do them. V'shomar Hashem elokecha esach bris, Hashem will uphold the covenant, v'esach chesed, the kind shen nishma l'avasecha, which He promised to your avos, to your forefathers. So Rashi, famous Rashi, cites the Midrash. Why does Torah use the term Ekev? If you heed even the seemingly less important mitzvos, which a person normally tramples on with his heel, means the mitzvahs that are not valued, because we evaluate them as being not that important. Mitzvahs kalos, if you observe even those, then Hashem will keep His promise, as it says, the bris, the chesed, which He promised lavosecha. Now it continues, v'hevcho, He will love you because of this, ubeiracho, He will bless you, v'yirbecho, He will increase you, uberiach privitnecho, friyamosecha, He will bless the fruit of your womb, the fruit of the land, the gondcho, your grain, siroshcha, yitzarecha, your wine, your oil, shkar lofecha, shosenecho, al dom asher nishba lavasecha, your flocks, your herds, losisloch. And it doesn't stop. Baruch tiyeh mikol amim. If you do this, you will bless more of the nations. Lo yivcha oka v'akora. There won't be anyone who won't be able to be childbearing. Uemtecha, among your animals. Ve'isir Hashem ibcho kol choli v'chol madvi mitzrayim v'roim. God will remove from you all illness,
Coca-Cola,
and all the diseases of Egypt. Asher yodato, which you're aware of, which you know, lo yisim bom, He will not put them among you. Unesam lo yivecho, He will place them upon your enemies. V'chaltes kol ha'amim, and you will consume all the nations. That Hashem kef nos l'choloch, lo sochos einecha aleim. You should not have any compassion for them. Lo savaris Eloheim, you should not worship their gods. Ki mokishuloch, because it's a pitfall for you. Okay? So V'yekev Tishmun, so it starts. If you observe even the mitzvahs, hakalos, the seemingly ordinary mitzvahs, which people normally abuse, trample on, ignore, you'll merit every level of bracha. As it says, He will uphold the bris, the chesed, and it just doesn't stop. Now the question is why. You know, the halacha is, the law is, that if a person is morid b'malchus, he doesn't do what the king wants, which is considered rebellion against the king, he's liable for the death penalty. If the king tells you he wants you to show up with a red bow tie, and you don't, the king has a right to put you to death, because that's considered defying the king's order. Although it seems to be something unimportant, seems to be almost nonsensical, but because that is the order of the king, that's his dictate, you're liable for the death penalty. Although we read in Pirkei Avos, you should be zor b'mitzvah kaloki b'chamura. It says in Pirkei Avos, you should be as careful with an ordinary mitzvah as a mitzvah which is chamura, which is very severe. Why? Ki ato yodei schor shel mitzvos. Because you don't understand the extent of mitzvah, of the schar, the reward for mitzvos. It's like a person says, a certain deal is $1 billion deal. There's another deal which is $100 million deal. Person says, I only do the $1 billion deals. I don't do the $100 million deals. if you'd only understand the value of the 100 million, you do the $100 million deal. So lahavdil, havizor mitzvah kala b'chamura. You should be as careful with an ordinary mitzvah. What in your eyes you see as a mitzvah kala, as an ordinary mitzvah, a light mitzvah, no less than a more severe mitzvah, because you don't know the innate value of a mitzvah. Would you see it as being ordinary, unimportant, it's not worth your while, you don't even relate, understand, and you cannot fathom the extent of the reward of that. I'll give you an example. In Europe, when the war broke out, World War II, money was, when they say money is king, money is king. People who had cash, very often that was your ticket to survival, to be able to live. To purchase that ticket, to bribe that official to get those papers, to be able to leave Europe, that was key. And people before had money, they wasted it, they abused it, and it wasn't available to them. But those who had it, even though it wasn't a very large sum of money, but when you need it at the time, it has the value is life and death. The Chofetz Chaim writes that the neshama lives eternally. He explains that if a person eats healthy and you're sufficiently nourished on every level, after a day or two, the body has to be replenished. Because the body consumes whatever that nourishment is, it has to be replenished. The neshama has to be infused with spiritual nourishment. What is the value? What is the extent of this infusion? It has to last for all eternity. Because the neshama is eternal, as we can see in a moment. Last week, the parsha ended, Hayom la'asosam. Today you do the mitzvah, l'moch l'kabel soram. Tomorrow it's the schar. Whatever we infuse in the neshama today, the effect is eternally forever after we leave this world, what we call olam haba. So therefore, what is the value even of the most seemingly simple mitzvah? It's enough to give you eternity. It lasts forever. So what's the value of something lasting forever? So how could you not understand the value, even what you consider simple, if every mitzvah is part of that profile, that it gives you a share in the world to come? How do you underestimate the value of that mitzvah? This having zor mitzvah kal b'chamura. You should be no less careful in an ordinary mitzvah as a chamura, because because ultimately, when it comes, the halacha is, the Rambam says that what's the difference between a tzaddik and a rosha? Rov zochius is tzaddik. It is tshuva based on the Gemara Yuma. The majority of your actions are positive. The classification is tzaddik. The majority are negative. It's rosha. And the Rambam says this quantification, evaluation is not quantitative, it's qualitative. And therefore only Hashem is able to make this evaluation. So let's say a person's in the balance, and you need the slightest degree of mitzvah to sway the balance to the positive. So that means what you did not value, because it was a mitzvah kala, that may sway the balance to the right, which your classification is tzaddik, which makes worlds of a difference, whether you get in or whether you don't get in, or what your level is going to be. Because if you're tzaddik, you have a different dimension of value. Havizor mitzvah kala b'chamura. You should be careful even with an ordinary mitzvah. As a chamura, mitzvah means it's not only you don't know the innate value of the mitzvah, because as I said, it's part of eternity, but the difference that it may make when you need it, and you may need it to sway the balance at that moment. This is the simple understanding, what I'm saying right now. However, we had once discussed something much more profound. Now, why do we use our yardstick to evaluate what's more important, what's less important? If it's the Dvar Hashem, if it's God's dictate, does it really make a difference? What you think, God says you have to put the penny in the tzedakah box, as you have to put on tefillin. You have to do shluch hakan, as you have to observe Shabbos. The mitzvah of procreation is an important mitzvah. And the mitzvah of what? Of saving a Jew, lo samar adam reyecho, is also, you're not in a position to make evaluations. What's more important, what's less important. God says you have to do it, you have to do it. How do you have a right to measure and evaluate what's more important, what's less important? If it's the Dvar Hashem, if it's God's dictate, you must keep it. So why do we use our own yardstick? Jay, this is your area. Because what's lishma? If the moment the person starts evaluating what's more important, what's less important, that confirms he's not doing it lishma. There's some element of self-interest in motivating you to do the mitzvah. Because if it's the Dvar Hashem, if it's God's will, you do it because that's what he wants. What do you mean? At any level, it should never even be considered that it's less important, it could wait. We say, mitzvah boliyot chal tach mitzena. Mitzvah presents itself, do not delay it. Well, we say, the certain mitzvah definitely won't delay. But what about this mitzvah? Why do you delay it? Well, because I don't think it has that utmost importance. But it doesn't have the utmost importance. Hashem says you must do it. It has that utmost importance. The answer is no. Because you're part of that equation. The moment that you're part of that equation, automatically you start evaluating, and your behavior and the level of investment, of ability and focus is determined because of that. But it's the Dvar Hashem, it doesn't make a difference. Whether it's simple or not, there's no such thing as simple or not. Therefore, if you do the mitzvah, She'odam Dosh Ba'Kevo, what do you merit? You merit unlimited bounty at every level of protection. Because that indicates that your connection to Hashem is at the ultimate level, and if you, at that ultimate level, you have every level of brocha and every level of protection.